All right, so here is the scene I'm working with. I believe this is Green Street. I'm here in San Francisco. I am going to try to include a bit of the Bay Bridge in the background and those distant hills, obviously using atmospheric perspective to push them back into the distance. I'm working on a 14 by 14 inch panel, and I'm using a limited palette of phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, titanium white, and cadmium yellow medium. All right, sketching in burnt sienna, establishing the big shapes here. I'm viewing these buildings on the right as one big shape, buildings on the left as one big shape, the mountain is a big shape. I'm doing sort of a zoomed in view of this scene, which is a little bit different from what I usually do, but I want to feature the bridge in the background, so I feel like I need to zoom in a bit. All right, so there's some cars towards the top of the hill that are parked 90 degrees to the curb, and then also 90 degrees to the curb over here. So we've got horizontal cars here, horizontal, horizontal, and there's some nice highlights on these cars, so I'll try to be featuring that. All right, starting with a mixture of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. I've thinned the mix a bit with liquid, which is a fast drying medium from Winsor & Newton. I just want to start mapping out some of the darkest darks. There's some shadows along the street here that I'm going to be losing. So this side of the street is actually the most important. There's some dark shapes over here, mostly trees. And this side of the street is more or less vertical, and this side has more of an angle to it. Obviously getting wider towards the bottom. It's kind of a big tree right here, and then another tree like this. As usual, I'm squinting at the scene, trying to reduce the scene into simple shapes, looking for an interesting abstract pattern. I added a touch more alizarin to the mix for some of the dark shapes within the buildings. I'll probably be lightening up these values just a little bit. I want this grouping of buildings and this grouping of buildings to feel united and not broken up with a bunch of little shapes. There's a tree here and a rooftop here, another tree here. Actually, I don't want these two to line up. Always looking for sort of echoing patterns or repeating patterns and trying to break those up. Maybe have this like that. That's a good start. All right, I've got a mixture of titanium white and ultramarine blue for some of the cast shadows on the street. And this is fairly saturated, but I don't mind because it's such a beautiful color. It's an opportunity for me to get some color into the painting. Even though I am using a limited palette and I want most of the colors to be somewhat grayed down, I do like the idea of having some bits of saturation here and there. Got a light purplish mix, putting in the bridge. Oh, thank you. It's funny, when you work from simple shapes, people can already see what's going on from across the street. All right, so I'm putting in the bridge now because I want to put in the sky and the distant hills, and I want to make sure that I get the values correct. I want to keep the value of the bridge light because I want it to recede, and I also want obviously the sky and the mountain to recede as well, so I'm going to keep the value of those light. All right, for the sky, I'm starting with a mixture of titanium white and phthalo blue, trying to keep this mixture thin because I will be adjusting the color and the value of the sky. All right, I added a bit of ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna to the mix. And the crest of this mountain is darker than the base, so I will lighten up this area here. Added some titanium white to the mix for that. And some of the distant mountain visible over here as well. There we go. As I mentioned, I'm treating this grouping of buildings as one shape and this grouping of buildings as one shape. And I am just starting with a grayish color that I mixed using phthalo blue, a little bit of titanium white, and some burnt sienna to kind of gray it down a bit. And I'm kind of focusing more on value than color at this point, but I do like this sort of blue-greenish color. I'm keeping this mix thin as well because I will be adding subtle shifts of color and value within all of the shapes, actually. Okay, do the same over on this side. The painting does look pretty messy at this point, especially up close. But from a distance, it's already starting to take shape. I want to mix up a warm gray for the street, so I'm starting with ultramarine blue and titanium white, and I'm going to add a bit of the complement. I gray down my colors using complements, and so the burnt sienna is an orangish color, so it's the complement of blue, so it kind of makes a gray. If I add more burnt sienna, then it makes a warm gray. If I add more ultramarine, it's a cool gray. I'm adding quite a bit more of the burnt sienna because I want it to be really warm. I want to make sure the roadway is quite a bit warmer in temperature than the sky. And I think I might have to actually warm this up even more, which is not a problem. We'll see how it goes. At this point, I'm starting to define some of the shapes using a natural bristle number 6. And I'm not thinning the paint at this point. This is the thickness that the paint comes out of the tube. All right, painting over the sky with a thicker mixture of titanium white and phthalo blue. I want to lighten up the sky a little bit. And I'm using a number 8 natural bristle flat. This brush holds a lot of paint. I can cover the panel really quickly. All right, so I'm also lightening up these distant mountains. I want to make sure that everything in the background here is really light in value and cool in temperature. I'm gonna have to touch up the bridge a bit. Getting the bridge right is gonna be really important because it's kind of a key feature. I'm going to try to paint it using this number 6 natural bristle flat so that I avoid getting overly detailed. There's some highlights on the bridge here from cars that are driving across. I want to include them but make them very subtle. And I really struggled with this bridge. Still not sure if I am happy with it, but I'm going to keep it like this for now. All right, I'm adding thicker paint to the top of the street, and I've warmed it up quite a bit with burnt sienna and some cadmium yellow medium. And then down here, the street is kind of a cooler color, but I do want the top to be warmer so that I have a nice contrast with the distant water. All right, so I've got titanium white here, straight out of the tube. Just adding some highlights for these distant cars, a couple over here, and then there's a few right here as well on this side. And I try to add these quickly without overthinking the strokes. Also adding some thicker paint to the trees, a bit of warmth. I'm going back into the car shapes here with some purple. Nice to get a variety of cools in the shadows. And it also allows me to reduce the size of some of these highlights. All right, now I'm working into the building shapes with thicker paint and just looking for variations. This part is kind of fun. I could just play around within these shapes, and as long as I don't break up the value pattern, I'll still hang on to the composition. So there's a lot of freedom actually within these buildings. And I'm just using the scenery as raw materials or as inspiration, but I'm not trying to paint each building exactly as I see it. All right, so here's what I finished up with. This painting took about 2 hours to complete. It was finished on site. I did add some windows and some highlights on the buildings, in particular in this area right here around the top of the street. One of the most important things to me and with this painting was to create a convincing feeling of depth in regards to the bridge. I wanted the bridge and the mountain to feel like they were in the distance and not overly present. And I wanted a strong separation between the land in the foreground and then, like I said, the mountain and the bridge in the distance. I did have to experiment quite a bit to get the value of the bridge and the distant mountain just right. Usually what happens is I'll paint distant objects too dark, and that was the case in this particular painting as well. So I had to continue to lighten up those distant objects until they felt like they were sufficiently in the distance. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's a Patreon support that helps me keep making these videos, and it's much appreciated, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.